and welcome to the DC Overlord channel. I am the DC Overlord, and today we are continuing the series where we talk about episodes of Superman and Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and maybe Batman. And today we're talking about Stolen Memories. And Stolen Memories is a really great one. It's a really great way of introducing Superman and Brainiac's dynamic with each other. Obviously, this is not the first time we see Brainiac, because we actually saw Brainiac in the first episode, The Last Son of Krypton. But this is where we officially get to meet Brainiac as a design concept, as a Superman villain. And it's not even this big episode either. It's just kind of casually introduced. And I think that's really great because it sets Brainiac up for a later date. We know that he's a threat. We know that he's a menace. But this is not the end of his story. And this is only the beginning. This is also the first episode where we see the Fortress of Solitude, which is also a great thing to have, because we get to set up all this Superman lore, and this is really about getting to know who Superman is. For the general audience who doesn't know, this is the episode where you really get to see what Superman is really about. The other episodes are just as good, of course, but this episode really is the one that introduces very prominent DC Superman villain, obviously being Brainiac. But it also helps characterize and kind of gets you to understand Lex Luthor a little bit, because he's also involved in this project and kind of introduces Lex's morals and standings in society, what he believes in, what he believes is right, and his disagreements with Superman, and his also wanting to work together with Superman to achieve a specific goal that he has, right? So he's not completely against Superman. It's more like he's more curious or wants to get to know Superman's world. And all of this is kind of leading up to Lex Luthor obviously being a very powerful person, being a very threatening person to Superman, because he knows a lot about Superman. He learns a lot about Superman and his weaknesses and his powers and how to manipulate them, how to fight him. And obviously in these episodes, Superman is a little bit more depowered. He is not as powerful as he would be in the comics, but it's kind of naturally done in a way because, he kind of has to be that way. He's both powerful and also not as powerful as he normally is, which has its own problems, but I think as a story it really does work. The way that they made Superman, it's kind of more of the classic version of Superman, where he's not exactly invulnerable. It's more he can withstand a lot. There's a lot that he can withstand. He's not invincible, but he's not weak. And I think I actually kind of like this sort of approach with Superman. Although it's not really the version that I would want to see on the big screen. I don't think I would want Superman to be powerless to stop certain threats. But I also kind of understand if you need to kind of rein him in a little bit so that down the line when you get to those really important stories, especially with the Justice League, you can really kind of grow their story, without always using Superman as the default response, the default solution. And especially since this is obviously 90s, 2000s kids show, it doesn't have to be this grand thing. The reason why this episode just evolves itself is just this show in general just evolves itself because it doesn't treat the audience like kids. It doesn't treat the audience like adults. it just tells a story that it needs to tell, and people just kind of understand that. I think there's kind of a magic in the way that Superman the animated series portrays Superman, and obviously all of this is kind of leading into Justice League and how Superman is characterized in Justice League. And we'll get to talk about that later once we get to that moment. But I think if there's a way to kind of be comic book accurate, but also keep Superman more powerful, like just as powerful as he normally. I mean, it's very complicated, right? Because you want to tell a great story, you want to tell a great series, but there's not a lot of threats that would really truly threaten Superman unless you introduce like a weakness, or like maybe there's like some things that are just as powerful as him. But in order to deal with the human problems, the more non-threatening problems, in order to make an episode out of them, you do kind of have to see kind of the more human side of Superman, kind of the more vulnerable side of Superman, and that's what I think that the Superman the animated series does really well. It balances the difference between Superman and Clark, while also keeping Superman not to be this like god, but to be simply just a person with powers who really has his true motivations, his true morals to support him, and overall be this hero that everybody wants him to be, but also understands that he has this challenge. He's definitely challenged in this series a lot, to a certain extent, of course. But we'll definitely talk about it more as we get into these episodes. I think also I like how this episode is not just fighting. Because Brainiac, when you're dealing with a villain like Brainiac, you could very easily turn this into Superman versus Brainiac. They're fighting each other, they're destroying each other, they're constantly fighting. This is not really a fighting episode. This is a Superman is learning about his world episode. Superman is trying to figure out what to do with someone like Brainiac. Like does he destroy them? Does he help him? And then he just even discovers what happened to the worlds that he's seeing. Why the memories are here. All these planets, all these worlds have been destroyed by Brainiac. And he learns that one of the big reasons why Krypton is gone is because of Brainiac. Now, that's not necessarily the reason in the comics, because the reason is actually, like, Rao, I think, is one of the big reasons for Krypton exploding. But since we're not using Rao in this series, in this episode, in this universe, you can easily have Brainiac be that reason as to why Krypton ultimately exploded. And can kind of make him out to be a bigger villain and a bigger threat, not just to Superman, but also his people, and use this as a way for Superman to be able to learn more about his people. I think there's definitely ways you can introduce a lot of this, like, for example, usually the route they go is like the crystal from Jor-El that mimics Jor-El's personality. But in this instance, we don't really have that. We don't really see that. So, in order for Cal to really know more about his people, to know more about his world, he has to turn to someone like Brainiac. And he ultimately does. He takes the orb about Krypton, and he uses it to learn more about Krypton. And you could say, well, Superman wouldn't really do that because he's taking what sacrificed millions of lives. But not only, it does exist, and it's kind of just the way that he is able to learn about his people, how to learn about his heritage, to learn more about Krypton. And, I think this is a great way of setting that up, without making it too complicated. Because you could easily make this very convoluted, very complicated, like have this be a real moral test, but it really isn't that, right? It really isn't that. I think the next episode that we're going to talk about, which is The Main Man, is kind of also interesting as well. Like, you have that juxtaposition between Lobo and Superman. But we'll talk about that in the next episode. But ultimately, I want to hear your thoughts about Stolen Memories. Do you really like this episode? I know this is some people's like favorite episode in the first season. I think it's between like this episode and The Main Man. But I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think makes this episode really good, really special? Comment down below, and I'll see you guys next time when we talk about The Main Man. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.